day my life really changed was the 27th of July, 1985 at 11:45 p.m.
What was the moment when you realised that I'm going to represent our country?
And down back straight, as I always say, I heard a funny pop, and I ended up breaking the British record that stood for 10 years. And I went from being ranked, I think, about 7th in the UK to 5th in the world. In August, I got selected to represent Great Britain in the men's over 55s basketball team. And it was at that point that I just instantly made a decision. I'm going to finish this race if it's the last race I run.
This episode of All Things Business, the podcast, is brought to you by digital media partner DFA Law. DFA Law, providers of expert and dedicated legal advice to businesses and families since 1838. DFA Law, the law firm for life.
Derek Redmond, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much. Good to be here.
Yeah, I've really been looking forward to this one. We're approaching the end of the year.
Yeah.
That famous time of New Year, New Me, as everyone starts to plan what they want to do in 2025.
Yeah.
And what better than to get a famous Olympian like yourself? But I want to go back to where it all started.
Okay.
So, was Bletchley your hometown?
I was born in Bletchley, Milton Keynes.
Yeah. Good old MK.
Good old MK, yeah.
And what was school life like for you?
To be honest, school life was more Northampton. So I was born in Bletchley, but moved to Northampton when I was about 5.
Yeah.
6. So I really remember more of Northampton than I do Bletchley. But school life, primary school was fine.
Where did you go?
I went to Stoke Bruin Primary School. I only had 2 classrooms. I think there was about 40 kids
In the school?
in the whole school, which was pretty cool. Secondary school, not so fine. I went to Road School, and me and my sister, who's 2 years older than me, were the first 2 black kids at that school. So that added challenges, let's say. And she had it 2 years before I did, and then when I got there, it was pretty crap, to be honest with you. I remember day one, I won't name him just in case he still lives in Northampton, but day one, my new blazer, and we all had blazers that were 3 years too big, hopefully you'd grow
They'll
into
last
them.
you to year 9.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
And I turned up, literally green as this wall, and I'm getting all the names thrown at me, this, that, da-da-da-da-da. And there was a guy, he would have been, in my day, it was first year, second year, third year, fourth year, fifth year. Having had 4 kids gone through school, I still get confused with year 11. Anyway, he would have been in the 4th or 5th year. I was the first year, and during the summer he'd broken his leg, and he had his whole leg in plaster, and he'd broken it apparently on a motorbike, cross or whatever. Anyway, him and his mates came up, and they're giving it all the words and this and that. So me being a cheeky little so-and-so and being pretty quick, so I kicked him in his good leg and legged it. Left it at that, thought that was the end of it. And then at lunchtime, his mates caught up with me and beat the stuffing out of me, ripped the arms off my blazer, drew all over it. And that was pretty much how my secondary school life started. But by the time I was, say, in my 3rd year, sport was my sanctuary. That was my playground. And even people in my own year who used to give me a hard time, I'd take the mick out of them in sport on the sports field. And then getting, called up in assembly to come and get certificates for county representation, England representation, all that, gave me a little bit of
kudos
and credibility. And it kind of died down a bit. And because I stood up for myself, by the time I was in the 4th year, I was deemed as one of the tough kids in the school. And I wasn't. I just stood up for myself.
Was that your safe space then? That
playing sports field was absolutely my safe space.
You just sort of came into your own.
That was a place I could be me.
Yeah.
And I didn't give a monkeys what went on. And I was doing sports pretty much every night after school, every lunch hour.
Because one thing I found out, we're going to come on about obviously the Olympics and stuff, but you played 2 other professional sports, didn't you?
Yeah, correct.
But before we get to that, what was your favourite sport growing up at school?
Athletics.
It was always athletics.
Always athletics, basketball, and I used to love gymnastics. And I had a sports teacher called Mr. Henderson. He's possibly not with us. Ian Henderson, his name was, and he was. And if you speak to most sportsmen and women that have competed at the highest level, there's one person outside their family. There's one person that's influenced them to compete really well. Akabusi has a guy who was in the army with, everybody has this one person who can see something. And mine was a teacher. His name's Ian Henderson, but obviously at school,
he's at Road.
This was at Road, and I know him as Mr. Henderson because he was my teacher. And he was the man that saw something in me and really took time to help me in whatever sport I was doing.
It's funny you say that, because mine was Mr. Dabbs.
Right. Okay.
And he's retired now, but I went to Reading, Wellingborough. And if I ever see him, if it's in Sainsbury's or whatever, I'll say, "Morning, sir."
Yeah.
I still call him sir.
Absolutely.
Probably because I'm taller than him now, but
Yeah.
back then, you could
respect.
get a little clip.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
it is respect. And him and Mr. Petty, Mr. Roberts were the PE team, but Mr. Dabbs was the one that.
Well, Mr.
took me under
Henderson
his
was the
wing.
one who got me into it, and then we had Mr. Lobb, Mrs. Lobb, and Mr. Lyons, who were other sports teachers that came. And Mr. Pinkney, he wasn't even a sports teacher, but he was a basketball player. He was pretty tall, and he started really getting basketball known into road. So all these people, but Mr. Ian Henderson was the one who was a bit of a massive influence on me.
Now, athletics is so broad because there's so many different disciplines.
Yeah.
At what point did you realise that 400 metres was going to be yours?
So there's two parts to that question. I joined the club when I was 7, and that was Milton Keynes Athletics Club, and I did a bit of everything, but it became very obvious that I was quick. And when we moved to Northampton, I then changed from Milton Keynes Athletics Club to Northampton Phoenix as a sprinter.
Yeah.
And I ran the 1s and 2s for many years, up until about I was 15. And
What were you doing 100 metres in?
I
back then?
can't remember time-wise at that age. Yeah, no, 14, 15 years. I cannot remember. 13, I don't know. Can't remember. Maybe quick, I can't remember. But on one particular day, I ran the 100, finished third, ran the 200 and finished third. And the guy from my age group who was supposed to run the 400 didn't run. I was asked, would I just fill in and do it? And it's one of those things, even if you come 8th, you get 1 point for your club. And the club at the end of the day that's amassed the most amount of points wins. And I did it. I had no idea how to run a 400. Won it and broke the county record for my age group.
No.
With not a clue of what I was doing.
And on that, is it back then? Would it have been a case from the coaching perspective, getting your track, getting your like the intervals and stuff right, or was it a case of, "Go on, Derek, just help us out here because we haven't got anyone"?
It was a case of just help us out, because I've never trained for 400.
Yeah.
And it was just a case, look, it's on the day, the 400's in an hour and a half, he's not turned up, we need someone to do it. I don't care if you walk around,
Just do
because
it.
you'll get a point. As long as you finish the race, first place gets 8 points, 8th place gets 1 point, and it works its way down. And I remember talking to my dad. My dad's there, and we go, "I don't know how to run it." So we literally went to a field, and my dad put my bag down there and like my my spike bag down there, and went my sprint between those two, and I legged it. He went, "No, that's too quick. Do it again." I went a bit slow, and he went, "That's too slow." He said, "For the first half of the race, go half in between what you just did.
Yeah.
And then when you get to 200, 250, just give it everything
on.
you got." And that's all I did. And I had no idea, So I won my first 400. And then for the rest of the seasons, I ran the 100s, the 200s and the 4. Never won a 100, never won a 200, and won all the 400s. And at the end of that year, I said to my coach, "I think I want to become a 400 metre runner." And that was 1983, and I would have been about 15. And then the following year, as a 400 metre runner, I ended up finishing that season second fastest 400 metre runner in the country for my age group. And that's where it went on.
Wow. And what was it like back then? Because technology and communication, I'm guessing you when you go for national trials, how talk us through that? How often was that? And
So
how did they hear about you nationally?
Yeah, so national championships obviously were once a year. And to be honest, that hasn't really changed the way it works. So when you compete, it's all under, the governing body.
Yeah.
So all the times are registered. So the powers that be will see the times, because all athletics meetings are under the national governing body, that everything's registered. So all the times will get sort of, if you like, recorded and listed.
Yeah.
There's a magazine called Athletics Weekly that used to come out every week. So if there was county championships, whatever, it would list all of the times. It's proper Statos magazine. It was full of interviews and stuff, but all the times of all the meetings and goodness knows what. And they may not like it or not, but athletes, we are anoraks and statos. It's all about times, distances, heights, all that sort of stuff. So you'd read all about them, you'd see all about them. So obviously, as you get quicker,
you get more
England
noticed.
team managers and all this sort of selectors will notice you, and you get invited to training events, this and that. You go to the English schools, which is a big meet, and obviously that's the biggest competition for school pupils at secondary school level. If you win the English schools, you're the best in the country.
And on this journey, have you developed any rivalries at this point with other lads from?
Of course, yeah. The better you get,
the more
there are, because at the end of the day, if you're just doing it for the hell of it, you don't know the guys. But as you get better, so I was always, one of the top guys in the Midland stroke South. There was a guy called Mark Thomas from Liverpool who was kind of the North. Then there was Mark McMahon from Scotland, this and that. There was a guy called Kurt Morby from Lincolnshire who was good. So you had these guys, and it's quite funny. You say rivalries. So one of those rivalries, he became one of my best friends, still is. So M. Thomas from Liverpool. Never seen the guy. And going back to this magazine, Athletics Weekly, you'd see the Northern Championships, junior men's 400. M. Thomas, 48 point whatever, M. Thomas, okay. Midlands Championships, D. Redmond, this and that. So the odd time, if you was lucky, they might put like a little postage stamp size picture, black and white picture of you in a magazine. More often than not, it wasn't. And it seemed like years, but it would have been just months. I'd always be seeing this M. Thomas. Didn't know what he looked like. And then one day we were racing in Birmingham, and men's 400, blah, 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 you go and do your walk, whatever, and then you're getting ready, you're standing in your lane. And they said, representing, in lane 1, representing the Southern, P. Weston, Paul Weston, this person, that person, and then Derek Redmond, and in lane 7, Mark Thomas. And I went,
that's what you look like.
That's what you look like. And he was standing there glaring at me because he's never seen me and I'd never seen him. Anyway, we ran the race. I won it. And after it, he's like, and he's got this proper broad Scouse accent, and he's going, I've been seeing you. I dedicated. And he had massive shoulders. Anyway, literally 2 years later, he ended up joining our squad, or a few years later, maybe not 2, maybe even more than that. I knew him as a junior athlete, and then a few years later, he was looking for a really good 400-metre coach, and he ended up coming to mine. He ended up becoming one of my training partners.
Really?
And to this day, he's one of my best mates.
I love it.
But yeah,
brilliant.
Yeah, he was just somewhat. So there was little rivalries.
Yeah.
Even at junior sort of level.
What was the moment when you realised that I'm going to represent our country?
Well, it happened pretty much the year after I moved into 400s as a junior. I finished second in the English schools, and if you finish in the top 2, you automatically get selected. So for the English schools, you get selected to represent England in a home international. So it's England, Ireland, Scotland, Wales. So as soon as I finished second, I had earned my first England cap. So it was very, very quick as a junior. Funny enough, now I look at it, I went up to Meadowbank Stadium, it's no longer there. England, Ireland, Scotland, Wales, and warming up for the 400, I pulled a hamstring. If only I knew that was going to be something. No. So I did actually get to run in my very first international. And then internationals came after that, and then that would have been 83, then 83, 84. I was sort of an 85. I was running lots of junior internationals. But the day my life really changed was the 27th of July, 1985 at 11:45 p.m. I told you we were statos. So I would have been 19, or would I have been 18? 18, 19 years of age. And there's a series of athletics meetings called Diamond Leagues, which you
they
possibly
still go on now.
They still go on now. Well, in my day, they were called Golden Leagues. Same thing, same principle. Maybe not as many. I think there's about 17, 18, 19 different globally now. There may have only been 10 or 12 back then. But anyway, and I had an agent by this time because I was now sort of knocking on the door of senior international competition. In fact, I may have had a couple of internationals. So I was being noticed, and I was now in the top 10, certainly in the UK. And I'd got picked for this athletics meeting, this Diamond League, or in that case, Golden League in Oslo. And I go to Oslo, and I'm now running against Olympians and Akabusi. There was Darren Clark, who finished 4th in the Olympics. There was Darryl Robertson, top American. There was all these guys. And the guy, my agent at the time, a guy called Andy Norman, said, look, just go there, just do your best, just soak it up. You're rubbing shoulders now against some of the best in the world. Anyway, I wasn't feeling particularly well. I had a bit of a cold. I wanted to pull out the race, and Chris said, don't pull out the race. Andy will kill you. You'll never get paid again.
Chris Akabusi said
this. So actually, I'm going to tell you a little secret now. So Chris said to me, look, do you sign your contract? I said, yeah, of course I did. I've just got a stinking headache, sore throat. I'm feeling a bit sick and nauseous and all that. And he said, well, just run the first half of the race, fake an injury and pull out. Because as long as you run over half your distance, whatever it is, you'll get paid. And I was getting paid a princely sum of $900, I think it was. So, most I've ever been paid in my life as an athlete. Anyway, that was the tactic I was going into. And by the time I got to 200, I remember thinking, right, get to 250 and pull out. And as you're coming off the bend, you can sense where you are in a race. And I thought, I'm doing all right. I'll go to 300 and then I'll pull out. So I get to 300 and now I've got 100 to go and I'm in front. Stupidly, I think, pull out at 350. So I get to 350 and there's no one in there. I thought, sod it, I might as well just keep on going. And I ended up breaking the British record that stood for 10 years. And I went from being ranked, I think, about 7th in the UK to 5th in the world.
Unbelievable.
And that was the moment, 27th of July, 1985, that completely changed my track and field world. And that's when the spotlight went, who's this
lad?
Young, skinny kid from Northampton, a bit rough around the edges in my style and all that. Who's it? And that's where that was a massive turning point in my life.
And obviously back then, fame, etc., is different to what it is now.
Yeah.
But Northampton still remained well and truly your home, didn't it?
Yeah, I was based in Northampton. I was living in a little village of Shuttlanger. I was known as either the Shuttlanger Flyer or Shuttlanger Streaker. I preferred the Flyer. Streaker sounds a little bit strange, but and then I moved into Northampton sort of later by about 88. But I was always...
You was at Coventry Park at one point, weren't you?
Yeah, on the golf course. Yeah.
Because this is a random one, but my how I got into publishing was through a guy called Alan Spooner,
Okay.
who started Business Times, and he was your next door neighbour.
Oh, right.
Alan and Julie.
Alan. Yes.
Julie Barnes Ward.
Yeah.
They had a business publication called Business
Yeah,
Times.
it wasn't right next door, but they were neighbours. Yeah.
And that's just random one because when I thought,
Yeah,
but,
that's right,
but
yeah.
Northamptonshire has been very much your home.
Yeah, absolutely. And if anybody asks where it's home and where did you grow up, I always say Northampton. It is, So
And then Barcelona, 92.
yeah,
I mean, you watch it. It's got to be one of the most iconic Olympic moments of all time. I think it's up there with the Mobot and even Usain Bolt's sort of famous, but for different reasons, obviously. But it's up there.
Yeah. I mean, it's had about 500 million views now. It was voted the third most popular and inspirational Olympic moment. Me being 3, 2 being Kerry Strong, a gymnast who broke her ankle in the team vault. I think it was against China, and she had a broken ankle and had to do one more vault, and she ran down with a broken ankle, did a vault, landed and nailed it, landed one-footed, absolutely nailed it. And the famous pictures of her on the rostrum, because obviously gymnastic rostrums are very long because it's like 6 in each team, and there's the 5 Americans, a big burly coach who's got like a big old mustache holding her. And then number 1 is, swimmer's name's just gone, Phelps. He's number 1.
Michael Phelps.
Yeah, Michael Phelps, he's the number 1. And I'm number 3, which is pretty impressive considering that most of the people who voted it were American, and they tend to
vote for their own.
Yeah. So yes, it's pretty pretty popular.
So take us back to that, because how were you feeling going into the final?
Well, it was a semi-final, and I was feeling in great shape. I mean, I'd had a few injury problems early part of the year. I had 3 operations on my Achilles tendon, 2 on one on the other. But we got myself into shape throughout the year. It wasn't the ideal preparation process, but we had to.
But because it was your hamstring that went.
It was a hamstring, but my main problem was Achilles tendon problem.
Yeah, but because your hamstring you hadn't had the. Well,
I had no problems. I had no problems with hamstring.
I didn't realise that your first ever 400 metre. What you said earlier about pulling that.
No,
then,
but
up until then,
hamstrings are a bit like. Back then, pulling a hamstring for a sprinter was like a cyclist getting a puncture.
Yeah.
It happens. So everything had been fine. Achilles was my problem. We'd kind of got over that. My Achilles was strapped up. One of them was worse than the other, but we kind of got over that. I went into those championships in absolutely unbelievable shape. Certainly the best shape of my life, and you hear lots of people say that in sport, but I was. The heat, I won. I was the fastest qualifier.
You were going to medal, weren't you?
I was going to medal.
Yeah.
Second round, I won. And both of those rounds, I ran so easy, and even the times were relatively decent considering the effort I put in. So the semi-final was just a formality for me, even though I was taking it 100% serious. And down the back straight, as I always say, I heard a funny pop. I thought it was something in the crowd, and I kept on running for 2 or 3 strides, and that pop was my hamstring going, and then the pain just hit me, and my first thought was I've been shot in the back of my leg, or something like that. I mean, that was how painful it felt. And I just hit the deck, and a few choice words, why me? And then the thought that went through my head was, because I was so focused, the thought that went through my head was, it's semi-final. Where are they? And they've continued running, the other athletes, and they got about 120 metres to go. I'm on the floor with 250 metres to go, but the thought that went through my head was, if I get up now and start running, I'll catch at least 4 of them, because it was the first 4 to get into the final. Yeah. So I get up and I hobble 200 metres, look across to see where they are. Obviously they finished. And it was at that point that I just instantly made a decision. I'm going to finish this race if it's the last race I run. And the reason I wanted to finish it, when I look back now, I felt I could live with finishing 8th and getting knocked out, but I couldn't live with not finishing. And also finishing 8th in the semi-final and getting knocked out kind of is a stepping stone to going back into training for the next Olympics and saying, right, now I want to do better than I did at the last Olympics. It's almost like foundations. Yeah. That's the worst it's ever going to be. So now we know we can do that. Let's go to the next level. But unfortunately, the injury was too severe that I never made it back. You know, certainly wasn't for the want of trying, because in a 18-month period, so between Barcelona 92, which would have been August, and April 94, I had 7 operations on my hamstring because I just kept on breaking down. Wow. And the surgeon just said, mate,
that's it, you're done.
Yeah, you're done.
And do you have problems with it, or did you have problems significant afterwards? I know, obviously not to that level, but
not to that level. I'm very wary with my hamstrings. I never run flat out, because I know if I try to, and there has been a couple of times I try to, and I have strained them, I have pulled them. Even the other one, you were going to get onto other sports, which we will, I guess, in a bit. I pulled my left one, which was the other one, only some 8 weeks ago, training for another sport, but that was an overcompensation injury because I had Achilles problems. So yeah, I still have issues with them, and I'm never going to be able to sprint flat out again on them, because they're just not going
to go from being on such a high, if you like, of going into that race, semi-final, Olympics, etc. Favourite to certainly medal, mate, if not win gold, and then to hit rock bottom, which nobody would have predicted.
No.
How was that meant from a mental perspective?
It was difficult. I mean, it took me 2 years to really get over it. I'm not going to sit here and say, I was majorly depressed and suicidal and, hitting the bottle. I wasn't, but I guess I was depressed in one way, shape or form, but it wasn't something you could really recognise. I wasn't the best person to live with. It wasn't good. It was a horrible time. I was very bitter towards the sport, towards people in the sport. I felt that if there should be a magic remote and I can pause the world of athletics, get myself back and press play and continue. There was a lot of selfish, why me kind of, attitudes. Now, there's no two ways about it. I was very bitter. I felt the sport owed me.
Yeah.
That's, how I did. And I don't know how, I don't know when, I don't know what it was. I describe it like when you got a headache. You've got a headache, you take a couple of headache tablets, and then a few hours pass and you go, oh, my headache's gone, but you can't pinpoint when it went.
Yeah.
And that's how this went with me. I kind of went from that to recognising that there's a lot worse things that could have happened. And at the end of the day, bottom line, I pulled a muscle in a race. There's people out there with a lot more going on. And I know when I say this, people have the same reaction that you just did. Yeah. It's a bit more than just a race, but
it's a great way of looking at it.
But it is bottom line.
Yeah.
That's all I did.
Yeah.
My family was fine. My health's fine. There's war, there's famine, there's all sorts of things going on in the world. There's people with a lot worse illnesses, cancers, this, that, whatever. And something kind of hit. I was obviously watching something, and it just made me kind of put it into real perspective. Yeah. And that's how I was able to deal with it. All you did, Derek, was pull a muscle in a race, look at what's going on around you, and that's what kind of...
And it's the time and the journey that you go on to get to that point.
Of course.
No, a really courageous way of looking at it. Tell us about the other 2 sports then.
Well, there's more than 2 sports. So,
there's more?
Yeah. So,
but I'm on about professionally.
Yeah, professionally. So I'll do this very quickly. So after the 7 operations, the surgeon, and he was to blame or I should thank for this, because after the 7th operation, he said, look, your hamstring's done, your career's over, you're never going to compete for your country again, so just go and get yourself a regular job and live a regular life for your own peace of mind. So he was saying it for the right reasons, but that kind of lit a fire in me anyway. So 2.5 years after him saying that, I ended up playing professional basketball for Birmingham Bullets, and had one international playing basketball. And I actually sent that same surgeon a photograph of me playing basketball for England, and I put on, thanks for your confidence. And then because of that, I remember talking to my dad and saying, I can't believe I've not heard from the doctor. I thought that would have spurred him to at least write to me, and he didn't. And my dad said, look, you're over it. And I said, I'm not over it. It still does my head in when I am saying you're never going to compete for your country again. So I then wanted to do something nobody had done, because up until that point, there was maybe 5 or 6 of us that had competed for our country in 2 separate sports, but no one had ever done it in 3. So I said, I want to do it in 3 because I want to send him another photo. So I literally quit basketball, got into rugby, played professionally for Coventry Rugby Football Club. We at the time were in Division 1. Obviously was hoping.
What position did you play?
Oh, on the wing. Keep out of all the trouble. I didn't want to go around looking like that, cauliflower ears and a bent nose. No, I leave that to the forwards, yeah. So I played on the wing, got into sevens in quite a big way. And then I did try out for England at sevens twice, but didn't get in. Then got out of that, got in.
And your hamstring was all right there?
Well, the funny thing was, this is the cheeky thing. One, it's on grass, and I think that helped because it's a bit softer.
Yeah.
You're not ripping your muscles as much as you are on a track, because it's
so
very
quick though, isn't it, sevens?
Yeah, it is quick. But I was very fortunate that I never ran flat out in sevens, but I was always quick enough or quicker than the people that I did. So I ran as quick as I needed to.
Yeah, you might have been at 70%, 75%.
Yeah. If I had a Martin of Fire chasing me down, at his best, and I had to give it some, then that might have been a different story. And no disrespect to the guys I played against, I didn't have to do what I deemed as flat out. Because at my best, I used to be able to run 10.2 for the 100. A quick rugby player is deemed at 10.8, 10.9. So I could run at 10.8, 10.9, 11 seconds, because 10.8, 10.9 is deemed as a really quick player. So there weren't many, certainly at the level I was playing, that were at that speed. So I could possibly run the equivalent of 11.5. To kind of put it into some kind of perspective. So it wasn't too bad. I did tweak it a few times, and I did have to maybe warm up a bit longer than most of the other players did because of the problems that I had. Got out of rugby, family, got out of professional sport, family comes around and whatnot, and I'm working and doing what I'm doing. And then I got into bikes. I wanted to learn to ride a bike, and then I got into doing track days, and then I got into racing bikes, and we got into endurance racing. And the team that I had, we won a national title in 2011. So won a national championship. Then I got out of that in 2014, then got into kickboxing, which I won a national title at that. Then got out of kickboxing and got into a bit of white collar boxing and sort of semi-pro type boxing, and I'm now 59, still fighting, 7 fights, 7 wins, 13 kickboxing fights. So yeah, still doing that. And in August, this is where the other hamstring injury comes in. In August, I got selected to represent Great Britain in the men's over 55s basketball team, and we're playing in the World Champs in Switzerland next year. In fact, we had a practice yesterday.
Really?
Yesterday afternoon. So that's my focus.
Oh, mate, fantastic.
And on top of all that, I got into clay pigeon shooting in a big way. Loving it. So that's my new sport.
Where do you shoot?
Sywell.
Sywell Range.
Yeah, Sywell. We also shoot in Horton, and we travel around and do some others, around the country. In Bedford, we go shooting targets. We go to Daventry. There's one out in Daventry. We go to Coventry, Stoke and I'm loving it.
Really?
Yeah. My wife's into it
as well.
Not as bad as me.
Yeah.
So I didn't think I'd ever say this. I bought a gun the other week. Now there's something I didn't think I was going to say. So yeah, I'm into quite a few things.
And well, that's obviously keeping you busy. But the basketball thing, we need an update on that to follow that progress, because I'm right in thinking this now. You're way out on your own in terms of professional athlete that's represented the country at multiple sports.
In 2, there's a few that's done it.
Yeah,
in 2.
no, but you're not at 3.
As a professional, maybe not at 3. No.
Yeah.
I don't know how many have done that. So obviously the athletics, the basketball, and the rugby.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
So clay pigeon. Well, one thing that did get me interested was the shooting at the Olympics. I thought that was.
And we got I forgot the girl's name. She got robbed.
Yeah, at the end.
Yeah, because she did clip, a little piece came off, and you only need to have the slightest slither.
If VAR had been at the Olympics,
she'd be gold medalist.
She'd be gold medalist.
Yeah.
Because her daughter was in the.
Well, her husband or boyfriend surprised her and brought her daughter.
With the daughter, I remember seeing that. Watching that.
Yeah, I wasn't even shooting back then.
Yeah.
So this has only been the last.
So what got you into shooting this time?
A mate of mine, Darren Knight. I'll give him a name check. And he's a guy I go boxing with. He always works my corners when I fight. He's a real outdoors guy. And he said, "Oh, you should come one day with the boys. You'll love it. You'll love it. You'll love it." And I said, "Yeah." And he's been saying it for about a year and a half. And literally, tail end of the summer, he said it. I went, "Do you know what? I'll come along." And that was it. So I love it.
And boxing, Northampton's got a real good core of professional boxers. Where do you train out of?
I train out at Rough and Ready, so with Felix Fighting Systems, as they call it. So Pop Felix is the main one, and then he's got the three sons that train and fight. And they've all at one point been professional. So there's, let me get it right, Dominic Felix, Jason Felix, and Curtis Jr. They've all fought, at sort of professional levels and that. And I just do it with them because when I did the white collar, they were the people we went to and who helped organise it and did all the training. And I've just stuck with them, since then. And they've become part of they are part of the boxing family that I'm involved in.
Brilliant. Yeah. Now you've been obviously very active, still are.
Yeah.
What are you doing? Dare I say 9 to 5, or not 9 to 5 actually, because you're a very talented auctioneer as well. But we'll come on to that in a bit. But you're a wonderful, inspirational, motivational speaker as well.
Yeah.
You've been doing that for what, 10, 12 years?
27 years.
27.
So I'm
10 to 12 with champions. Sorry.
That's right. So I've been speaking now for 27 years. And I'm a motivational, inspirational speaker, also an author, but I'm also a business performance coach. So I will go into organizations and help develop people, teams, organizations, sort of develop those people to perform better. And everything is based on what I've learned and used in the world of sport. Some of them will be just a presentation, a company will come and ask to do a presentation. I deliver workshops, whether it's on resilience, whether it's on goal setting, whether it's on high performing teams, teamwork, team engagement, all these sort of things that are very relevant in sport. And I've been doing that, as I say, for coming up to 28 years. It'll be 28 years in January.
And it's taking you all over the globe, hasn't it?
All over the globe. Yeah, I travel. I do a hell of a lot of travelling. I'm lucky my wife's my PA because she comes on a lot of the trips, books herself on half of them at the time.
What's the standout one? Give me a couple of examples of ones that have really...
Okay, I mean, I was invited out to Washington by Michelle Obama to go and speak at an event there, and was invited to the White House.
Wow. What was that like? I need to ask about
that. That was
Stop there a minute. What happened there?
So it goes back to 2016.
Yeah.
Earlier than 2016. The 2016 Olympics ended up being in Rio, as we know. 7 years prior to that is when the last, I think it's 7 countries who are bidding for an Olympic Games do their final pitch, their final speeches to say why their city should have it. So apart from Rio, one of the other countries was Chicago. Barack Obama, or as he was at the time, President Barack Obama has massive ties to Chicago. Excuse me, I think it's where he lived. Anyway, he was given the last minute speech for and on behalf, because they always get a big name in. For London, we had Seb Coe doing it for us, and they invited David Beckham and all these sorts of things, remember? So he was doing that, and in his presidential final, come on, this is why you should have Chicago, he name-checked me and talked about what happened in Barcelona. So I don't know why he did, who turned him towards that. I'm sure he had someone writing his speech and said this would be a good thing. I don't know. But anyway, that obviously put me on his radar type thing. And then a few years later, I got in. It was in 2016, because that was his last year. I got invited out to speak at a children's charity event that Michelle Obama was the
like the president of, or
the president of,
trustee,
and she patron. That's the word I was looking for. And she had expressed interest in me coming out and speaking because she'd obviously heard about whatever. So I went out there, did that, and Maria came to that one, and we got invited to the White House. And the plan was to meet them both at the White House, but they couldn't guarantee it. And funny enough, he was in his last couple of months of being being the president, because obviously then he got in, Mr. Trump. So we're walking around, and we're being shown around this and that. And I didn't know at the White House, unless you're either in the forces or invited, it's the only way that you can get in. So went all through the security things, and we're part of this group, and we've been shown around all parts of the White House and this and that, and there's security everywhere. And all of a sudden, this big burly bloke in a suit came up to me. He'd been talking into his sleeve for 10 minutes, came up and says, Mr. Redmond, the president sends his regards, and he knows you're in the building, but unfortunately he's unable to see you. He does give you wishes you the best of luck, and he is so sorry that he can't see you. So I've gone, okay. And up until then, no one had recognised me. And everyone's going, who's he? Who's he? Yeah. The president was going to go and see him, type thing. So that's now, whether he was in the building or not, and they just did that to blow a bit of smoke. No, but I'm talking about that and dining out and that for the rest of my life.
I would be as well.
Yeah, so that was obviously
that's up there.
Yeah. I guess one of the other ones that would be up there is the biggest audience I've had, which was 78,000, and that was at the NEC. And they used about 4 of their halls, and that was to a network marketing company called begins with an A. I can't think what it is. Amway. Back in the day.
Amway. Yeah, everyone remembers Amway.
Everybody was an Amway salesperson.
Yeah,
and they had
I think my auntie was.
Yeah, well, she possibly might have been there because they had 78,000 people.
Wow.
So that's the biggest audience that I've had. So there's lots. I mean, I've spoken in Australia. I've spoken all over America, in the Caribbean. I've spoken in Europe. I'm in Europe, quite a lot. I've spoken in Dubai, Middle East, which I absolutely love. I've spoken in the Far East. I had a great one for speaking on behalf of Burberry. They flew me and my wife out business class. We turned up at the hotel. They said, right, we've got a meeting, somebody meeting reception. They took us to this shopping centre, all these designer shops. There was a Burberry shop, and they said, fill your boots. We want you in Burberry. You got to wear attire. So they fitted my wife in this beautiful long Burberry Mac that she wanted, and and they treated us like absolute superstars. And even when the event was done, they said, look, why didn't you stay on for a few more days? We just couldn't, because I had other events to go to. Oh, can't you stay? We love you. I can't, type thing. So there's been some great ones. I've been really fortunate over the years to speak in some fantastic venues in fantastic places, in fantastic countries, and we get to see, a lot of the world.
But a message for maybe if there's a younger person or a young Derek Redmond that would be watching or listening to this, that might be facing challenges, obstacles, whether they be injuries that's, restricting them from kicking on and maybe hitting where they want to be, and maybe where they destined to be as well. What advice would you give to them?
I think the first bit of advice I would give is be patient. The one thing I lacked in my early years was patience, and that ate away at me. This injury should be, clearing up, should be healing up. I want to be out there. And then on certain times, I came back from injury too soon, which, funny enough, made it worse. And I spent more time out rather than, not. So patience is one. Finding people or a person that you can listen to, and almost like a mentor type thing. And that person doesn't have to be an expert in sport. I was lucky I had my old man. He's passed away now, I've lost him 2 years ago, but we were so close, and he always used to bring me back down to earth, and didn't need to be an expert in athletics. This is just normal human behaviour and, and good practice type things. But I think the other thing that I would say is there's 2 things that I think helps with success: consistency and persistence. Just keep on going and going and going. And
that doesn't matter in sport. That's in life.
In
that's
life,
in business.
I'm talking in life.
Yeah.
Consistency and persistence, and the persistent side of it. I was once asked, "What does success mean to you?" And I said, "It's simple: getting up one more time than you've been knocked down. So if you've been knocked down 1 billion times, just get up one more, 1,000,001. If it's 1,000,001, get up 1,000,002. So that comes under persistence. So for me, consistency and persistence, is what gets people. Basically, consistency plus persistence equals success, and success can mean different things to different people. But that's the thing I think is what's key. And if you want to look at it in a sporting way, you keep on training and keep going through the process, and you do that regularly, you will become very good at said sport.
Those marginal gains as well.
It is marginal gains, but it's just that persistence and consistency, which is actually the big part. Then you bolt on the marginal gains after that, because then you start looking at little things that can help tweak what you're doing. But the main two ingredients in that pie is consistency and persistence.
If I may, obviously I never had the pleasure or honour of meeting your dad, but he's obviously iconic in that moment back in '92.
Yeah.
And then listening to what you just said, but when you got that first call up to run the 400, go on, son, run from there to there. No, that's too quick. No, I compare that like my relationship with my father.
Yeah.
And I think that is, your dad might not have been an expert at coaching or athletic, but that's sort of just common sense. It's that mentorship.
You've said something I was just about to say. My dad may not have been the most talented, athletic, knowledgeable person in the world. Of course he wasn't. He only he did a little bit when he was young, but he learned his athletics through me being involved in the sport. Yeah. He never coached me, but my dad had an abundance of common sense, and common sense is the one thing that we need in whatever we do. He was pretty successful in business himself. He had common sense. He also had an unbelievable work ethic. You know, he was brought up in a broken home in Trinidad, came over to this country. The first day he got over here, and he was picked up from Southampton and driven to London in a rusty old transit van, he saw a Rolls Royce and said, one day I'm going to have one of them. And I remember I was living in Birmingham, and he rang my doorbell and said, come outside here. And he had his first Bentley, and he had private number plates on it, OCR1, because my dad's proper name was Overland Clement Redmond, even everyone called him Jim. So we had OCR1, and right underneath the front of on the front number plate, it had ambition achieved, and underneath the back one, it had through hard work and dedication. Oh. So all of that sort of stuff, my old man just drilled into me. But common sense, that hard work ethic, that if you're going to do something, do it properly. And I remember once, and I could sit here for hours telling you, I use it a lot in my work, a lot of stuff my dad's. I can remember once my dad saying to me, Derek, I don't care what sport you do. All I don't want you to do is waste 3 people's time. His, my own, and the coaches. So just give it 100%. I don't care how good or bad you are at it, but as long as you are giving it everything you got and you're not wasting him saying, my time, or me wasting my own time, or the coach's time, then I'm good. And things like that have always stuck with me, because he didn't put any expectations on pressures on performance, but what he did put is expectations and pressure on my commitment. Yeah. And that's the thing that, so again, when I talk about, the consistency and the persistency, that comes from the commitment that you put into these things. Yeah. And he's still one of my heroes to this day. And now we've lost him 2 years ago. I talk about him more in a lot in my work than I did even when he was around.
Yeah. No, I see that, mate. In all of that, I think it's a very special man.
Yeah.
Right. With every episode of the podcast, Derek, we always end with a dinner party guest. So 4 people, past or present, who you'd like to go for
4
dinner
people.
with. Yeah.
Okay.
And you, obviously you're at the dinner table as well.
Okay. 4 people. It would have to be someone like Muhammad Ali. I would love to sit down with Barack Obama. He would be another one. Nicole Scherzinger, just because I think she's lovely, and I'd love to chill with her and spend some time with Nicole. That sounded really dodgy, but I don't mean it in a dodgy way. I just think she's a great person. Who would the 4th person be? There's 2 other heroes I've got, Michael Jordan and Daley Thompson. I know Daley really well, so I'd possibly go with Michael Jordan as my 4th one.
And what's your go-to restaurant in Northamptonshire?
Go-to restaurant in Northampton, possibly New Ovo. I love the place.
Yeah, Stuart.
Yeah, Stuart.
Love him.
Yeah, absolutely. New Ovo. That's one of our favourites. Yeah, love that place. In fact, took my wife there last week for her birthday. She was the big 5-0. And I was there a couple of weeks prior to that with a business friend of mine, and then I'm there in a couple of weeks' time. So yeah, New Ovo would possibly be my go-to.
Brilliant. Derek, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on. I've loved sitting down with you, and I'm sure our audience have loved listening to you as well. So all the best for 2025.
Thank you.
We want to follow this this journey of basketball and
shooting,
as
absolutely.
well.
It's in 2028. You never know.